Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Solid Ground. Look, if you are joining me online, pop on, say hello, tell me where you are and how things are there in New Zealand, because amongst other things, I am not in New Zealand at the moment. So I'd love to know a little bit about where you are and making sure you can hear me because I'm using all sorts of new technology, and clearly I don't have my usual background. So hello, I can see Chris coming through here from lovely Hawke's Bay, to Catherine there in Dunedin. Lovely to have you joining me. Guys, let me know if the sound's no good or anything like that. As I say, it's all a bit new at the moment. Because of all the... Hello, Philippa. Lovely to have you join me here this morning. Actually, just exciting to have you all here. If you are new to Solid Ground, two things to keep in mind. One is, if you want to speak to me or put a comment live into the show, jump onto the Family First Facebook page or the Family First YouTube. There your comments will pop up just like this. So like Catherine's here, we've got Chris's, lovely Philippa's as well. We've got Mandy there from the Wairarapa, wonderful Rosie from Taupo. So if you want to, and thank you so much, Sylvia, good to know. And we've got Sue here. Look, one of the things I'm beginning to learn actually is if I take away my usual equipment, things work better. The other thing I have to remember, guys, is I have no mute button today. So I'm going to have to be careful. Hey, look, a couple of things, because there's so much to share with you. But for those who are regulars, you'll know that there's normally a different background. This is clearly not the background. There's a song. There's a song called "We're a Long Way from Tipperary." Well, that's a hint, because actually I'm exceptionally close, in fact, in Tipperary. So yes, you find me here in Ireland, of all places. It's actually 7 o'clock on Monday night. So of course it's 8 in the morning there in New Zealand on a Tuesday. So yes, I am in Tipperary in Ireland. It's a bit of an emotional journey, actually. Some of you may know, but most of you won't. I'm actually a citizen of Ireland. I'm also a New Zealand citizen, before anyone freaks out about my time in Parliament. But this is actually the first time that I've been able to get to Ireland. So Rachel and I are here and starting a bit of a journey around the country. And as I say, I'm in Tipperary, or in the county of Tipperary at the moment, and coming obviously live to you from a hotel. So that is brilliant, and I'm loving it here. It's been some gorgeous, gorgeous days. We've just been actually walking in the Wicklow Mountains and then jumped on to the motorway system to get us to, well, Tipperary. And then I'm going to head further south tomorrow, where my grandfather was born and where he left. He left here in 1916. And if any of you know your history, you'll know why. So going to go to where he lived, church where he was baptized and so forth. So it's going to be quite a cool journey. So yes, coming to you live from Ireland. And it's freezing cold. It's freezing cold. The other thing I might add is that in your time, for all of you sitting there in New Zealand, and we've got Lynette here, I've sent like 4 mugs to Lynette. So those are those cups, the Solid Ground cups. I haven't bought one with me. Lynette, you have been so patient, because as she knows better than I do, of the 4 mugs we've sent, 3 have been smashed to pieces. But fortunately, one got there, and Simply Green's nailed it. It is a long way to Tipperary, and it's a long way to go. But as I say, I'm literally here. The other thing for you all in New Zealand, I am actually 1 year older there in New Zealand than I am here in Ireland today. So there's a little bit of a, I don't know, is that a riddle for you? How can I be a year older in New Zealand today, and yet a year younger here in Ireland? So I'll leave you with that for now. Oh, and by the way, if you have any suggestions, we're heading to the south of Ireland and then heading west. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, let us know. So Philippa, I was in Wicklow today, walking down Bridge Street and Castle Street and Market Street. If you know Wicklow or been there, it was a lovely little place to be. So yes, live here, Solid Ground from Ireland. So what took Rachel and me here? Well, it's been something called the ARC Conference. That was in London. So you may have been following Family First and my page, and you would have seen videos from Bob and I and our wonderful videographer, being Rachel, we've been in London for the ARC conference. It stands for the Alliance of Responsible Citizens. And I thought I'd just spend a little bit of time on that this morning, because actually it's a really important alliance. It was started by the likes of Jordan Peterson. You'll all be familiar with him. Baroness Philippa Stroud, she's an English baroness and member of the House of Lords. I actually know her. She and I were on the same page when it came to euthanasia, so I've actually met and talked to her before. And then the likes of Douglas Murray, Constantine Crisson. I think it's, I always forget the lady's name, which is rather rude of me, but the one who runs the Michaelius School in the UK, the world's toughest school, Os Guinness, just a whole array of thinkers and speakers who basically say that actually our Western values, our Western Judeo-Christian values, and the societies we created are worth protecting. They're valuable. And the conference started a year ago in London. There was about 1,000 people. And I'm really pleased to tell you that over 4,000, so that's 4,000 of us, were in London a few days ago. And as I say, it was myself and Bob and Rachel from the Family First side. You didn't see much of Rachel. She was very kindly behind the camera doing the videos for us. But an amazing array of speakers. And if you haven't seen the email from Bob yet, we've highlighted some of the great speeches. And look, it was 3 days of just endless speeches and thoughts on everything, again, from our value system to our culture, our politics, energy and climate. It was really, really fantastic. And I suppose for me, just to really quickly download, there's a guy called Os Guinness. I'm going to see if I can get him actually on the podcast. But he talks about civilizations, like our Western civilization, and you could add others too, Roman, Greek, Islamic, whatever. Civilizations either renew themselves, they are replaced, or they decline. And you can see when it comes to our Western culture, there's certainly a trajectory of decline. There's a decadence, a brokenness. There's definitely, as you will all know, been an attempt to replace our Judeo-Christian or Western liberal democracies. It's one of the reasons, a lot of your young people have been told that, our colonial history, all our history is terrible. Everyone's a white supremacist. Everything is terrible in the West, which is funny because they still stay in the West and never go to any other country. So the attempts, if you will, to replace have been quite problematic. And again, I could speak for hours on this. And in fact, I'm trying to write a Substack about it. The attempts over the last probably 50, 60 years to replace the culture, the civilization we had, has failed spectacularly. You can call it progressivism, whatever term you want to put to it. And Simply Green's beginning to nail where I'm going to go with this. And by the way, hello to Ruth and to Elizabeth too, who's telling me that she has Tipperary ancestry. The attempt to replace the Western democratic liberalism that we're all familiar with. And again, you're all familiar with the Green Party, Te Pāti Māori, all the academics, the ones shrilly crying, as I say, that everything is wrong with our country and culture. It's failed spectacularly. The progressive experiment has already shown appalling results. More suicides, more divorces, more violence. Obviously, what's happening to children, this gender identity stuff, where we're both poisoning and mutilating children. As I say, we've got more violence in society. We now, abort young people up to and after birth. We euthanize our elderly. I mean, it's just appalling. On just about every metric, the attempt to replace our society has failed. So it won't surprise you that those at ARC, and Bob and I, Rachel, were part of it, say that we can actually renew. We can renew our civilization. We can actually look at Western Judeo-Christian, Western liberal democracy and say, yep, it's not perfect, but it's the best system in the world. And we can actually prove that, guys, because have you noticed around the world, all the migrants are trying to come to Western liberal Judeo-Christian countries. No one's trying to go to Syria. No one's trying to go to Afghanistan. No one's trying to migrate into the Middle East other than Israel. There's a reason for that. And it's one of the striking ironies, I have to say, politically, being here in Europe. And actually, I might just come to that. Bob has either knows his Gaelic or he's leapt on to Google. But anyway, before I get on some of the political points, just a quick heads up. These were some of the people I met at ARC. So this is Amanda Ackman. She is an amazing pro-lifer and a person who fights against euthanasia. Incredibly articulate. 2 points about her, apart from being fabulous. One is I did a podcast with her late last year, so check that out on Family Matters. But the other more exciting news is she is coming to our forum on the family later this year. So yes, Amanda, there she is, next to some very red smiley guy. She is coming to the forum on the family. Speaking of forum on the family, you will remember Katie Faust, the indomitable Katie Faust. So caught up with her while I was there. She was amazing. And then for the politicos, apologies for the photo. The guy who took it thought he was an expert in photography, and I have to say not so much. But Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, one of the most eccentric, but I have to say wonderful members of Parliament. He and I chatted for a very, very long time. We were actually at a pro-life dinner. This was one of the evenings. So he and I had a good long chat about all matters, on our case, Catholic, political, and pro-life. So it was all quite exciting, I have to say. I thoroughly enjoyed it. He was a really, really cool person to talk to. Hey, one of the striking things is, hey, ARC is about trying to renew our civilization. It's not saying that Western society is perfect, the Judeo-Christian values are perfect, none of that. It's trying to say, actually, there's still a lot of good. There's still a lot of good. And as I say, it's a movement which is growing. We had the leader of the Conservative Party there, Kemi Bannadoc, Nigel Farage was there, Tony Abbott was there, Scott Morrison was there, which really I would like to have gone and seen him actually and told him off. We had a whole array of political, religious, cultural and academic leaders. It really was quite the powerhouse. And actually Bob and I are looking forward to bringing you a number of podcasts and interviews with these guys over time. But one of the things, as I said just a little bit earlier, was these tensions within the cultures. And one thing struck me is you don't get a lot of the news in New Zealand about actually what's happening here in Europe and why a lot of people are upset, why you've had riots and why there's a lot of tension and why you're actually seeing an increase in votes for the right. So in recent days, you might have seen in Germany, the conservative right has won the majority. And what's called the AfD, I don't know what it stands for, but it's seen as a much more right-wing party, quite controversial, but it's won over 20% of the vote in Germany. It's got a number of people worried. But I just thought one of the things to note, because you won't hear about it in New Zealand, are stories like this. And this is happening every day over here in Europe. So this was only 1 or 2 days ago in Germany. This was again, and there's something unfortunately in common. These are all migrants and they're all Muslim, and it's happening just about every day. So this was Berlin, this was France, I think just yesterday. These are just 2 very, very quick examples, and it links back to what I was saying earlier about civilizations and what's happening. And so you probably hear a little bit in New Zealand media about the migration discussions here and the tensions that are in Europe, but you very rarely, I think, hear any of this news. And I can just say in the week or so that I and Rachel have been here in the UK, now in Ireland, and of course close to Europe, just about every day there's a story like this. There's a knifing, a stabbing, I suppose it's the same thing. Just about every week or so, someone's driving a car into people. There's a lot of violence here, and it's almost universally. So this one here in France, Macron, the president, very clearly said it was an Islamist attack. I don't want to over-egg these things, but I just think you need to understand that this violence is very regular here in Europe, almost daily, and it's almost always Muslim immigrants, often young men. Some have mental health issues, but it's a major, major problem. And so really just 2 points to take away from that. One, you don't hear about that in New Zealand. I haven't seen any reporting on it whatsoever. And secondly, it's one of the reasons why I think you are seeing the rise of the populist right and so forth. And so I'm not making judgments on that, but when I have seen New Zealand reporting, it's as if somehow all these things are happening in a vacuum, but they're not. As I say, this stuff tragically is happening almost daily. And these are just 2 examples in as many days here. It's quite shocking. But speaking of violence, of course, we've had this lunacy happening. while I've been away. Look, I leave the country for 5 minutes and look what happens. Look, Family First has put out a few statements on this. Long and short, I don't support violence or harassment in any shape or form. I think Destiny were completely out of line. I think it's perfectly fine to object to drag queens to children. Personally, I think you're better off focusing on the parents. I think this is actually parents compromising deliberately their children in order to look, I don't know, liberal, woke, or popular to society. I mean, it really doesn't make much sense. I mean, by and large, the likes of drag story time is just hypersexualized behavior in front of children. And again, one, you could look at the motivations of the drag queens, and B, what on earth is happening with the parents. But the important thing for me is that it is the parents who are responsible for their children. And I just think it was wrong of Destiny to be barging on in the way that they did. And the violence, it's just not acceptable. And to me, it's not acceptable in the same way as the vicious violence of the trans activists with Posey Parker. And unfortunately, the violence that we saw at the end of the COVID protests, for example. So, peaceful protest, pushing back against these narratives, lobbying, all of that makes perfect sense. But I just don't believe Destiny was right to do this. I think actually they've done enormous damage to themselves and actually to a lot of us who are advocating for children in this space. It's turned what are basically sexualizing adults into victims, and they're not. But as I say, it's important that the parents actually have rights over their child. What I have noticed, though, is just fascinating how the media, again, I'm miles and miles away, have just absolutely taken this story and run with it in a way they never did with the Posey Parker. In fact, it's completely opposite. So after the violence, and absolute explicit violence in Albert Park against women and the likes of Posey Parker, almost really nothing was really said. No one, as I'm aware, lost their jobs. Obviously, a couple were eventually charged, but very little was made of the protesters and their violence. In fact, in many ways, our mainstream or legacy media sort of agreed with them. Here with the Destiny situation, well, they hate Brian Tamaki, and so, as I've seen from overseas, just day after day of absolutely slamming the man, going after, I think this is a charitable status now. We have Women's Refuge, of all things, coming out saying, well, we don't like his Man Up program, which I think is hilarious from Women's Refuge, who A, don't know what a woman is, and B, have been putting submissions into Parliament about the mutilation, and pharmaceutical drug use of children. I mean, just, clean up your own bedroom, so to speak. So I've just been struck again how mainstream media are just incredibly biased about how they approach things. As RP says here, protesting, yes, but look, that's the point. There shouldn't have been violence at the library. There shouldn't have been violence at Albert Park. There shouldn't have been violence at the end of, say, the COVID protest. It's just not appropriate. Rosie notes that the library is not a place for drag queens. Well, no, I don't think it is. But libraries are, if you will, free to do that. What I think is striking, again, it's the hypocrisy in operation in our system and bureaucrats, is libraries stop people from holding other events, like Speak Up for Women, people who actually believe in biological sex, the immutability of biological sex, aren't allowed to go into these public spaces. So we've got a problem in our society. Again, ARC is trying to address these things, as is Family First. You've got a two-tiered system. If you're progressive or woke or left-wing, the media will love on you. You can't do anything wrong. You can get access to all public facilities. You basically have a halo. If you're on the more conservative side, if you believe in Western democracy, if you're Christian, if you're promoting, if you will, conservative values, you're to be harangued, you'll be abused, you're to be blocked, you'll be deplatformed. And I see even around these protests, that is some TV or radio host has lost his job. One, I'm not sure that's appropriate. And two, did anyone lose their job after the Posey Parker situation? Is it Chanel Lal, an instigator of terrible violence, what would equate to basically near death threats on Twitter, I believe now actually works in Parliament, sort of got promoted, if you will. So these are the hypocrisies that we see in play. Yeah, good question here from Simply Green. Well, of course they wouldn't. And you don't see drag queens going off to retirement villages. They seem very intent on reading to children, and I think that's a problem. There we go. Philippa makes a good point here. Yeah, I think the degree of violence was even worse at Albert Park. I still think there was violence. From what I can see, I've only seen some of the videos, but I think, it's violence, period. I think it was worse in Albert Park, and our police were absolutely useless there. In fact, I think I've seen, again, I'm travelling, but the Independent Police Conducts Authority actually came out and condemned the police for how they acted. And the police, unfortunately, being rather woke these days, have rejected everything. In fact, the police too have been reprimanded by my friend Lucy. She was the woman who stood in front of a pro-Hamas protest with a little sign, and she was arrested by police, dragged away, because they feared that her sign would cause the pro-Hamas supporters to get violent. So she was peacefully standing there. She was arrested because they were worried that others would get violent. I mean, what an inversion of our laws and policing system. But good news, the IPCA, the Independent Police Conducts Authority, have actually sided with Lucy. But let's see. Let's see. Catherine says you can't think about that poor lady. Yeah, Judith's her name. I actually met her. This is the woman, one of the women who were attacked in Albert Park. I actually met her a while back. Formidably strong woman, as you might expect. Anyway, I'm all over the place, as usual. Look, one of the things which has unfortunately come out of it, and I said why Destiny is sort of, I think, stuffing things up at times, but not completely their blame, let's be clear, just adding fuel to the fire. The government is continuing to flirt with taxing charities. As I say, they're wanting to deregister Destiny now. I think that's probably the wrong decision. The charitable status should not be based on sort of political punishment, which is how it seems to me to be being pushed at the moment. Look, this is just, as I've said a few times before, just a naked grab for money by the government. There is no money in the economy. The economy is in a real state at the moment. We could see in the last budget, there was problems with income, but the government's spending more, and the government is desperate to find more money, and now they're going to go after charities. And yes, some people will look at Sanitarium and other groups. That's fine. They are exceptional outliers, but at the end of the day, they are still charities. And so where do you begin to draw the line? Because there's so much talk. Well, there's billions and billions of dollars, they say, of profit from these charities. Look, one simple message for you guys. The profit is not like the profit of a corporate. It's the profit which is ultimately then used for charity. So for someone like Sanitarium, no matter what you think, and I still haven't fully, thought through them in particular, but Weet-Bix triathlons that they run, that probably comes out of their charitable work. Yeah, there's a promotional side, but that's charitable. All the various hospices, the Salvation Army, Barnardo's, you name them. Many of these run businesses, and every dollar that the government's going to tax them is a dollar not going to the front line. And do you really believe that Chris Luxon and Nicola Willis and anyone in government, be it left or right, knows how to spend money better? The answer is no, they don't. And the bureaucracy is even worse. So I'd much prefer to leave the money with the charities, genuine charities, to do their work. Yeah. And look, Simply Green, well, they won't. See, this is the other political dimension. So there's the financial side. As I say, every money the government takes, every dollar, is a dollar that's not going to go to help people. Okay? The second is, of course, it's going to be political. No way are they going to deregister the likes of these LGBTQI. They're more than happy to deregister Family First, but not Greenpeace. They'll very happily deregister the likes of Destiny, but not others. Yeah, anyway, just very, very frustrating. But unfortunately, when the likes of the Destiny Church go and do what they do, it just adds fuel to the fire, because I see there's a petition or something, deregister them, but very based on punishment. And I'd add the other thing, very anti-Christian motives. I've seen quite a lot of comments around that, and that's, again, not particularly encouraging for a Western liberal society. There's a very anti-Christian element coming through, and I think it's been clear actually in these Masterton fires. Again, the way it's reported, this is clearly deliberate arson, deliberately targeting Christian churches. Now, some of the intel, and others will know better, the person allegedly involved has major, probably mental health problems, but it does not take away from what's happened, deliberate targeting of Christian churches. Now, of course, had this been, well, we remember there was a building actually in Tauranga that had actually nothing to do with the LGBTQI community, but they jumped up in arms about it. Days and days of headlines. If this was a mosque, if this was a temple, an ashram, I suspect, excuse the French, all hell would have broken loose. We'd have had days and days of talking about the various phobias attacking minority groups and so forth. But because these are Christian churches, it's believed suspicious. Bob, I think, has made a post today, as in Bob McCoskrie, pointing out that there's no commentary on this whatsoever about, again, targeting of the Christian community, that it's hateful and so forth. All the usual language you would expect. As I say, if this was a mosque, we'd be having probably minute silences and weeks of media hand-wringing about what's wrong with New Zealand. But, burning churches, Christian churches, barely warrants a mention. It's just suspicious. So I just thought that was striking to me. Speaking politics very quickly, do take note of this. This is from the Facts NZ, great website. No, it's not directly Family First, but look, I'm a ex-politician. Basically, long and short, the Maori Party stole one of the Maori seats. It used to be held by Penny Hanare, a Labour MP. But if you haven't been following the news, there's been a number of scandals. Long and short, the marae was run by the now Maori Party MP, whose name I must admit slips my mind, but that's irrelevant. She was the chief executive. John Tamahiri was funneling the money to them to do census forms to help with the vaccination rollout and so forth. And long and short, they were accessing the data of over 6 government departments. Looks like they were photocopying and using all that personal data to then target people to vote for the Maori Party. And why I put up this image, and I hope you can see it. You can see at the top the Manarewa Marae, red obviously for Labour, black for the Maori Party. Look at just how much bigger that black line is compared to every other booth. So every other booth was either close or whatever, but the Maori Party booth at the Manarewa Marae was 8 times higher. So not only was the chief executive running for Parliament, not only were millions of dollars being funneled into that marae to do governmental work like census data, it looks like they were then misusing that data to target people for voting. And last point on this, the woman won by 42 votes. You heard that, 42, 4-2. So basically it was stolen. And let's not put too fine a point on this. The Maori Party are corrupt. So something to watch out for. Speaking of other things, you've obviously got these Chinese naval ships in the region. I have to admit, I told you so. Well, not so much you good people listening, but my political colleagues. I see from afar they're all running about saying this is a wake-up call and we need more defence funding, and isn't this a terrible thing? A few of us, like myself and Larissa Wall, have been telling them for years. We've been warning people for years about the CCP, its growing expansionism. So now, China has a new agreement with the Cook Islands. We now have Chinese warships live firing in the Tasman. Why they're down here, I do not know, other than intimidation. This is only the start. But I'm sad to say, New Zealand politicians, media commentators, and some academics, not all, have deliberately buried their head in the sand. They've basically given over New Zealand's sovereignty and national security to money and trade. And to be honest with you guys, I don't expect much more to happen. I think there'll be rending of garments and big talk of defence spending in New Zealand, but I just don't see it happening because, to be fair, where's the money? Where is the money? And do you really think that the current government's going to spend billions and billions of dollars more in this budget on defence and therefore not be able to spend on health and education and so forth? So, yeah, very frustrating. But this is the consequence of multiple governments, blue and red, not supporting our military and not standing up for China. As I say, if you know me, you know I've been speaking about this for years, warning about this for years, and being told off, being bullied and ignored. And here we are. And by the way, it's only going to get worse. Only going to get worse. Speaking of getting worse, did you see this news from the Congo? Again, you wouldn't see this in New Zealand's paper. It's a bit like the Masterton story. Doesn't really fit, does it? They're Christians. In this case, 70 Christians were beheaded by Islamists in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 70 of them. They went to the church and found them all beheaded. I mean, this is what we are dealing with, which links me all the way back to ARC. You know, we are a Western Judeo-Christian country, as is England, as is Ireland, as is Australia, Canada, and so forth. These values have underpinned many of the rights and freedoms we have. We don't go about cutting people's heads off. If you're following what's happening in Gaza at the moment, we do not parade babies' dead bodies. We don't hold some hostages in the car meters away from freedom and torture them. We have a different value system. And this, unfortunately, clash of value systems is happening in Congo at the moment. It's just absolutely horrid. Hey, look, a last couple of thoughts. Bob's, I see, done a podcast, a blog around this, but this is not about Katie Bradford per se. Actually got on well with her in Parliament, but long and short, we're actually seeing a large number now of journalists leaving mainstream media. So Katie is leaving TVNZ, and I'm sorry I don't have all the names in front of me, but at least 3 senior journalists are leaving TVNZ. Claire Trevette is leaving the New Zealand Herald, which I actually think is a bit of a loss. I had a lot of time for Claire, but New Zealand's media is in a terrible state. RP's nailed it here. This is about the CCP. So I've lost track of all the comments, guys. I apologise. I will begin to wrap up. But yeah, just noting the mainstream media is in big problem. But, you know, if I flick back on these stories, they don't report to you about this. They bury their head in the sand about the CCP. They've been pretty much silent at times on what's happening with China. They really don't care too much about... Sorry, this is Rachel messaging me. So I'm actually going to be naughty and send off a quick text and just tell her I'm about 5 minutes. There we go. Multitasking, fancy that. As I say, our media barely talk about this Masterton situation. They treat Destiny very different to how they treat trans and other violent groups that we've seen at likes of Albert Park. And as I say, there's all these terrible stabbings going on in France and Berlin, which you just don't hear about. So I'm just not surprised. That you are not getting the news from, well, why mainstream media is. Yep, Catherine's nailed it. She's nailed it. So look, a couple of things. I mentioned Israel in passing. Look, if you haven't yet read my Substack from a couple of weeks ago called Grotesque, I'd recommend you do so. I mean, obviously I'm biased, I wrote it. But it really outlines just what is continued grotesque behavior by Hamas. And it remains to me just beyond horrid, that there are New Zealanders like John Minter who continue to support these absolute lunatics. As I say, in recent days, they literally paraded dead babies' bodies. And it's not just Hamas, it's celebrating Gazans. It's just sick beyond measure. It's grotesque, absolutely grotesque. Slightly more positively, I sat down, this is on RCR, my reality check hat. I sat down recently with my friend Kevin Vong. He's a MP in Canada. We talk about why Justin Trudeau stood down. And actually, believe it or not, the person picked to replace him and to become Prime Minister is not even an elected MP. You get that? Not even an elected MP. In more exciting news, because I'm now all over the show, there is a new show in town. There we go. It's called Daybreak. Bob McCoskrie. Started on Monday, actually. Monday your time. So it's called Daybreak. It's going to be, I think, at 7 a.m. or maybe at 6 a.m., but it's early in the morning, strange enough, at daybreak. I think he's looking to do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's a very short show where he just quickly reflects on some of the news pretty much overnight. So check out Daybreak on all the channels. As I say, check out our Substacks as well. This is a bit of an older one, but Bob is prolific in writing. Got my Substack too, so go over to substack.com and just look for Bob's name or mine. This was one where I talked about J.D. Vance saying that you need to love your family first and so forth. So look, there's just no shortage, guys, of content coming out from Family First. And while it's slightly outdated, I'll just share this little snippet with you, which just gives you a hint of some of the other programs that we're working with.
If you're looking for news that you can trust, commentary on key family and social issues, and conservative conversations go no further. Family First has them all. Monday nights, live at 8 p.m, Straight Talk with our panel. Tuesday mornings, live at 8 a.m, Solid Ground with Simon O'Connor. Wednesdays, watch for the latest episode of Pulse Point to drop. We watch the news so that you don't have to. Thursdays, live at 5 p.m, Political Playback with Bob McCoskrie and Simon O'Connor discussing the week in Parliament and politics in general. Plus, there's regular episodes of social commentary with McBlog and interviews on family matters throughout the week. You can watch these live and also on demand on our website, Facebook page, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. Finally, something worth watching that you can trust. Go to familyfirst.watch for more details.
So guys, clearly no shortage. And look, just for Bob's sake, there is wonderful comments coming here. They enjoyed the new Daybreak show. Some people even think, well, they're all saying it's great actually. So there's Philippa as well. So yeah, Daybreak, as I say, the new show of Bob's every second morning. So it's not absolutely regular, but Mondays, Wednesday, and Fridays is when he's intending to give it a whirl. So guys, I'm going to leave it there. As I say, it's well, I'm in Ireland, and it's about 7:30 at night here. So Rachel's headed down to the little restaurant that's associated with this hotel. I'm going to go and join her for a bite too. But I'm going to leave you with what I said at the start. How is it that I am a year older in New Zealand time, where you are, but I'm a year younger where I am today? I'll leave that with you. Wonderful to have you all as part of Solid Ground. Look forward to talking to you again next week.